Hello, fine people. Welcome to the Nikhil Hogan Show. I am Nikhil Hogan, and my guest today is concert pianist, composer, and music educator Rami Bar-Niv. Bar-Niv made history by being the first and so far the only Israeli artist to perform in Egypt following the Begin Sadat Peace Treaty, praised as effective and flamboyant by the New York Times, and an original major talent by the Boston Globe. Bar-Niv is an international concert performer who has written two books. The first is The Art of Piano Fingering, and the second his autobiography, Blood, Sweat, and Tours, Notes from the Diary of a Concert Pianist. Hello, Rami. Welcome to the Nikhil Hogan Show.
Hello. I'm very happy to be here.
You started piano at the age of 5. Your father was a violinist. Your mother was your first piano teacher for 7 years. And here's a quote. Right from the start of my piano lessons, I also started playing by ear, improvising, and composing. And you were basically very musical, right?
Well, I hope so. If I took piano, improvised, and this question took me by surprise. I can't say. I hope I was musical.
Well, because when most kids take piano lessons, they usually are not so creative right off the bat. It takes a while. Can you explain that? Do you think it was because both your parents were playing a lot of music? Was there a lot of music on the radio? How was music a factor in your family life when you were young?
Music was all over the place. I grew up into music from very, very young age, as much as I can remember. And then if I don't remember, they told me stories. At age 2, I recognized a whole lot of classical compositions, symphonies, concertos, etc. And it was quite funny to hear me pronounce the names of Wieniawski or Tchaikovsky or stuff like that, being 2 years old. And they always kept on imitating me, and reminding me that through my life. So I grew into that total music environment. Both my parents were musicians, and actually that's what brought them together. That's how they met at the Conservatory of Music in Tel Aviv, and they started playing violin and piano together, and started playing like afternoon cafe music on weekends or stuff like this, and then they fell in love, and so yes. Now when I started at age 5, so I think that may have been late if you compare to some other people.
Well, can I ask this, Maestro? Was it mainly classical music, or were there also other, like for instance, Jewish music? You're from Israel. Did you listen to a whole range of different types of music?
Not really. I mean, listening. We listened. We had a record player, and we had records, and my parents. Throughout my childhood, they were in a record club, so they received new records every month, and the records were all classical music, all symphonies, concertos, solo works, all classical music. My father used to love to listen, so I got it after a while too. But there was once a week on radio. Jewish program of cantorial music. It's a beautiful music that I love. But so that's how I got to first hear it and listen to it. But it wasn't the main thing that I grew up on. It was just something on the side. Other Israeli folk music and songs and stuff like this, they were around me. It was on radio. It was people singing, dancing. And that's the stuff that I started playing by ear, But what I was learning with my mother was only classical material. The other stuff, other than classical, I did on my own. And it's exactly what my grandchildren, three of them that I'm teaching nowadays, three boys,
Great.
they they do too. I teach them classical. They way more than me all over the place. They also play other instruments, something I didn't really do. So they get everything around it on their own. They don't need me for that.
Some parents who are musicians, they might not want to teach their own children because of that family connection. They might want a stranger to teach their child. What was your mom's thinking behind that?
I really don't know, but I can guess. First, it's quite economical. Don't yes, don't forget that we're talking 70 years ago, and my parents more or less just started out with nothing, absolutely nothing. So it was economical. The other answer to this is that my mother did try to sign me up with other teachers, but that never lasted very long. They just wouldn't keep me, so it got me back.
Were you a good practicer? Did you follow your mother's instructions, or were you kind of a free thinking person?
I can't call this free thinking, but I was a horrible practicer. So, well, I just did practice, did like to practice, but she made me sit at the piano for half hour every day. We had one clock in the house, in the little apartment, and she put the clock on the piano, closed the door behind her, and I was to play for 30 minutes. It was the only clock in the house. Every single day, I moved the clock 5 minutes ahead, so I would have to practice on 25 minutes instead of half hour. Later, 9 o'clock news on the radio, they could never figure out why the clock was so bad every single day. So I didn't like to practice.
For composing, you started doing that as a young child and improvising, and you were playing by ear. But you said
Yes.
that you stopped doing that to focus on your performance career, your concert performance career. But you did study a classical education of harmony and counterpoint. Is this when you went to the conservatory?
Of course, all along I studied all the theoretical subjects and way more at the conservatory, at the Academy of Music, that's like university level, and then postgraduate, and all along I studied everything possible in classical music.
There are quite a few approaches, and I understand that you studied counterpoint and these things. There are certain different theoretical methods like harmonic function theory, Roman numerals, the French use figures, and you studied with Carl Schachter as well. And so all these different influences, did you have a dominant approach to your method?
Yes, mainly I think my what I learned was the Roman numbers analysis of chords and figured bass, because on figured bass, for example, they don't write the Roman numbers, but the idea is all the same. Uh, so this is the basic harmony that I learned. Things like what Hindemith wrote a book about once for the Turkish government, and I don't really know much other approaches for classical music.
Right. And for counterpoint, could you describe your education in counterpoint?
Hardly. That was the most unlike subject. by all of us pianists. They had one guy in the class. He was a violin player. He was the only one who liked that.
And what about harm?
So
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
no. So that I don't have much to say.
Often, I guess in pedagogy, they separate counterpoint, harmony, and orchestration and other areas. So is that we're talking about Hindemith's book? Was that a textbook that you used with Hindemith?
Yes, yes, but also around it and lots of other stuff. But harmony, pianists love harmony. That's how they approach that's how the instrument is made. And people with one line, one clef, one line melody, they like more counterpoint. It's how you brought up, with your musicality and your education. It has to do with the instrument also.
Did you find that since you were playing so much repertoire and so much great music, did you find yourself taking ideas from the repertoire and absorbing them?
Absolutely, yes. And well, often I am proud to when some little one measure or so reminds me of something else. Uh, I used quite a bit uh, folk songs in my music. Uh, I also used Bach's name, the four letters that make his name. That motif I used I think mostly unknowingly, but it appeared quite a number of times in my music. And I really like quotes, and I quote myself a lot too.
We mentioned Schachter earlier, so could you talk about your studies with him and what you studied with him?
Well, I studied with him theory, analysis uh, of pieces, Beethoven, naturally with the Schenker method, and but somehow we were friendly, and always after class we would linger and kind of at the piano. I would play, he would play, we would talk and further analyze and stuff like that.
And how long did you have those lessons? And can you give me your perspective on Schenkerian analysis?
Uh, I studied at Manas a few years. I think the lessons with Schachter were about 2 3 years. Uh, the theory it's wonderful. It's of course it's very elaborated. It's a big subject, but to look just at some basics, they're so um, logical that when you look at music, when you simply look at the graph, when you simply look at the sheet music, at the notes written, you already look at it as a as a building, as something else. It it's very clear to you what you're seeing.
You've said that form and structure are very important to you when you compose. Do you take from your lessons of theory and analysis and apply that to form? One thing I want to ask is sometimes you can spend a lot of time on theory, but also then I've noticed some people don't compose much, even though they might know a lot of theory, but you seem to be somebody who does compose and you have knowledge and you use the knowledge to compose. Do you find that theory is helpful to you when you actually compose, or you don't really think too much of theory when you compose?
Uh, Both. I don't think of theory when I compose, but how could I compose if I didn't know what I was doing? Uh, so it's both. I don't think, oh, what kind of chord shall I put next here, or stuff like this. Composing usually just comes out of you. Okay, you do get stuck sometimes, and this is only because you know what you want, and you know the shape and the form and the structure that you want, and all of a sudden you don't know how to match what your ideas were into that form or structure. But knowing theory, I think, is basic of basics. It's like composing without this is too gullible in my eyes. It's a bit, I don't know. I don't want to talk negatively, but it seems a little uh, I, not good enough, composing without knowing what really goes on.
You are a fabulous player, a top player. Does that inform your composing in a significant way? Because sometimes I've noticed, I guess in the 20th century or historically, sometimes composers, they drop the piano or they don't really play too much and they focus completely on writing. And sometimes concert pianists, they drop writing or they don't write at all and they focus on piano playing. Do you find that your playing has contributed to your composition?
Absolutely. I compose how I play. I mean, I compose what what I can play naturally. What is mm, comfortable and nice to me. And sometimes I would, in a composition, want to do something that I know it's possible, but I look at it and I say, nah, that's not for me. I'm going to just write it this way rather than, make it crazy, and but possible to play, but not flowing out of me with ease, which is what I find the compositions do. They come out natural, and the form is also natural to me, and the structure that you mentioned, that I said before, it's natural. It's a kind of a balance. You have to feel it. You have to weigh it. Like people in profession, I don't know, like a plumber knows exactly a length of or size of a hole or pipe or something like this, or by eye seeing or by feeling. Somebody selling stuff knows on his hand the weight of something. It's the same in the music. You gotta feel the real balance between things, and then check yourself and see if it makes sense.
One more quick question before I move on from the analysis is, can you share your personal relationship with Carl Schachter? Were you close to him? And yeah, since you seem to have spent a couple of years, did you have a warm friendship or was it more professional?
I would say that it was a professional, warm friendship. We never met outside school, okay? But at school, we spent lots of hours together, way more than just the classes.
Now, let's talk about improvising. It's something that you do, which is unusual if I take the history of the 20th century in terms of concert playing. Improvisation, I guess it's a dead or lost art, but you improvise. And can
Yes,
you tell me about that? So, did you always improvise throughout your whole life, or was it like when you were young or recently? Tell me about your improvisational, the history of improvisation for you.
I've always improvised. I did not use it much in public, in performances. It is usually for my own pleasure or at private parties. And I started as a very young because besides what I was taught, I was just exploring the piano, the instrument. It's been there all my life. Now there's there's more questions that I don't even know if I am suggesting a question that you should ask
I
me,
want to hear this question.
because uh, people talk about improvisation and creation as only when you create new notes. Uh, People don't take into account that playing a Beethoven sonata in performance has a lot of improvisation, a lot of creation. Okay, a lot is being prepared, which I believe is the case also in any improvisation, and that we can discuss in a minute. But also performing classical music has a big part of improvisation. Whether you play something faster or slower and how much rubato, more or less. After you've prepared everything, things happen while you perform. And those decisions are improvisation. If you change what you've prepared, you're improvising. And dynamics and stuff like this.
So this
So
is you're speaking of the art of interpretation.
I am, but I call this, I say the art of interpretation has a big part of improvisation in it and creation. The word creation, I think, is important also for improvisation. So that's one thing that I'd like to say. Uh, Now about improvisation, that means creating new notes. Also here, people divide. They say playing by ear. Let's say take a known song and just playing it at the piano. Some say it's not improvisation. Some say it is improvisation because you're just playing it every time it's different, and every time you just making up different notes around it, and maybe different rhythms and harmonies and basses and textures. So I don't know, but total improvisation from scratch, that also, well, you need to decide on a style, because okay, it can be a totally free style too, but if you're educated in various styles, you can pick from them and put them into improvisation of inventing kind of new music, like inventing a new Mozart movement or a new Bach prelude or fugue, which is not easy, or inventing on the spot something that will sound like a nocturne by Chopin. So there are all these possibilities, and one has to also decide what they want to do. And I very much like playing known songs, popular stuff, movie themes, and stuff like this. If I can sing the melody in my head, I can play it.
Do you sing, Maestro?
No, no, no. You don't want to hear me sing, but I said sing in my head.
Right,
If
right.
I have the,
Do you
I
hum
know.
when? Like, is it a physical sensation when you play? Do you feel like you want to hum along?
That humming is a problem. It is. It is. It is. The most famous humming is of course Glenn Gould. It's something some other pianists do, and everybody would be happy to get rid of it. I I am caught humming rarely, maybe more in my early days, only when I kind of mess the music a bit while performing. So it's a natural thing that you want to cover up. You can't really, but it helps you think you're covering up by humming.
So you mentioned film scores, popular music. I notice you also are interested in ragtime, and does that leads me to my question: are you interested in jazz music as well?
Um, I like classical jazz. I am not a connoisseur. I don't follow much uh, nowadays jazz players. I like some of the old names, old school. I myself am not a jazz pianist, but in my compositions and in my improvisations, I sure throw in some stuff.
You mentioned old
Jazz.
names. Could you be specific of the names you were thinking of?
Oh, names is like Dave Brubeck, like uh, George Shearing, really my favorite. Uh, People like that.
You said you love to quote, and how do you? Okay, actually, I want to add some parameters to this discussion of improvisation because I know you are a very accomplished teacher. So, if somebody wanted to learn improvisation, what are a couple of steps that somebody should work towards becoming a finished and accomplished improviser? What do you think are some good progressive steps?
I think that um, if I teach, I would need to have a frame. Somebody came and told me I want to be able to improvise classical music. For example, I would start with simple, like Anna Magdalena Bach uh, pieces, the minuets and other simple things, and I would show and teach how to embellish them. So when you start embellishing, when you start decorating, when you start changing things, are you already doing your own thing, which is what improvisation is, doing your own thing. And you learn the language, you learn what you can do. Then you can do fill in a scale. You can learn. You can do a little arpeggio. You can do trills. You can do ornaments. That's a beginning of improvisation to me for classical, and from there I will progress. If somebody comes in with pop music, they want to learn to be able to play by ear. Well, I would teach them the basic harmonies uh, and how to follow a melody with accompaniment, uh, the harmony, and then the possibilities of how you accompany, and then of course rhythm that you add, and how you actually act when you play a piano solo. If we're talking about pop music or even jazz, you act already as a jazz trio. At least you need to have a good bass, you need to have a good harmony, you need to have a good rhythm, and then a good melody. So it's so I would teach in that direction of the harmony, how to fit it to match melody and rhythm and types of accompaniments. And in jazz, it's not really my field, but I can start. As a matter of fact, I wrote a little book for kids where that's called Jazz Kid, with little pieces that are a little bluesy and jazzy, and so and with on that particular book, even though the notes are written out, I show, for example, the same little piece three times, and every time I add notes to it, I add rhythms to it, and I made slight changes. And that would be part of also teaching how to improvise, because what you do, you need to have a language, you need to have a library of tricks, and use them, uh, put them into your playing, and that'll make your improvisation.
Let's talk about how you would teach composition. So, what is if you got to work with someone for an extended period of time, how would you structure them learning how to compose?
Well, first of all, it depends on what level the student is already in composing, or is it a complete beginner? Usually, somebody who wants to compose does it already. So that I never had a case of somebody coming, I want to learn composition, and they haven't tried and they haven't done anything. So usually they do something, and then it's a good thing to start showing already, on what they bring or what they do. uh, and but composition is, you can't really teach composition unless the student learns uh, what other composers did. uh, you can't start a student in the first year of piano with composition. Maybe you can, but you have to constantly be with the level of their knowledge of other music. And by the way, when you ask me about my compositions and it's an improvisation in general. People can only improvise to the level of their technique of piano playing. Uh, Composers maybe don't have to unless they want to play it themselves. But improvisers who want to improvise, they must have the piano playing technique to do so. And I say with composition, you must have the knowledge of what's been done before. So if you're a beginner, it's okay. You can compose something from 3, 4 notes, and not that a one-note composition hasn't been done. But you grow, you learn what the music is about, what's been done, how compositions go, and then you learn styles. And you can't compose in an emptiness. You gotta have all this past geniuses music that was written. You have to know it to be able to come up with your own composition.
To know a piece of music, what does that really mean? So there are a lot of people who can play Beethoven or they can play Mozart, but what do you mean by know a piece, like really know it with a composer's insight?
Well, if you play it, you already know it pretty well. But if you analyze it, you know it even better. So being able to analyze a piece and being able to play it is a pretty good position to be in.
Did you face any pressure not to improvise publicly in your career? I get the sense that maybe a couple of decades before, improvisation was frowned upon. Is that true, or it just wasn't popular?
I do not know how to answer. I mean, I don't have knowledge of the general mood. I only know what I grew up with, classical music. That's what I knew. That's what I did. That's what was the career about. Uh, Maybe I never thought of it, but maybe my audience wouldn't appreciate uh, improvisation. Maybe they would, but I never tried. So I really don't know how to answer that. When I grew up, my idols when I was 5 years old were Mozart. When I was 7, 8, 9, 10, and heard LP long play album records at home on the record player, my heroes were Rubinstein, Horowitz. Uh, so they didn't improvise. So you will tell me soon. I know that Mozart improvised, but the people, the romantic virtuoso players that I knew when I grew up, knew I mean from records, and later on I heard them all live too. Uh, they didn't improvise. I went to a Horowitz Carnegie Hall concert. He didn't improvise. So that was the way I grew up. That was my thinking. That was my aspiration. And I wanted to be a concert pianist who can play a recital program or a concerto with an orchestra, just like they did. Okay, does that answer that question?
It does. When it came to cadenzas in piano concertos, what's your position on cadenzas? Should concert pianists write their own, or should they play the ones that have been written down?
Um, I don't know. I'm not sure if I have a position. There was a big debate and fight between big names, pianist and conductor and stuff over which cadenza to be played more than once. Yes. Uh, I'll just tell you my experience, and because I don't have a set opinion. If you are a great classical improviser, go ahead and improvise a cadenza. However, my opinion, and here I am opinionated, that the cadenza should be within the style of the concerto you play. You can't play a Mozart concerto and play a cadenza that sounds like a Prokofiev
Right.
piece. And people do that, and I don't like it and don't approve of it. So I say, if you're a great improviser to do something like Mozart, then great, go ahead and do it. If you're not a great improviser, if you're a composer, go ahead and compose one, which one of my students did. Fabulous C minor Mozart concerto. He wrote the cadenza and played it beautifully. If you can do this and that, by all means, they're fine cadenzas. Now, especially if the composer wrote a cadenza, I am pretty much okay. I guess I do have an opinion. If the composer wrote a cadenza, I'm pretty much against the necessity of doing a new cadenza. If the composer didn't, then by all means, we need a cadenza. I'll just give you a couple of examples of my own.
Sure.
When I was a child and I learned Beethoven first or second concerto, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. He wrote the second as his first. I started writing a cadenza, writing out in by hand, and I never finished it, I think, and I never performed that cadenza. The only other experience with the cadenza that I did is in recent years. I wrote a cadenza where there isn't even a cadenza, but there's a fermata in the Haydn D major concerto in the third movement. There's a fermata, and I decided the small cadenza would be nicer, and I wrote it out. I composed it and wrote it out and played it in concerts. So that's about cadenzas.
You said this about your influences in your voice. You said, I was heavily influenced by my classical music upbringing and education. In my Israeli music, I was influenced by my composition teachers like Paul Benheim, whose style was known as the Mediterranean style. In American music, I was influenced by Joplin and Gershwin. That is not to say that other composers didn't influence me too. My compositions were also influenced by Jewish music and by jazz. So could you talk about your voice? How did you come to creating your compositional voice?
Uh, I I don't know what to say. I wasn't looking for my voice or voice. I was just composing. And all those things that you just quoted somehow were watching me from the back, and here and there they pop up. So I wasn't looking for any specific voice, and whatever came out, came out. This is really hard for me but it brings another subject. I mean, when you're going to compose or when you're going to improvise, is your main goal and first goal to be unique, to be new, to be only you? Uh, is that the most important thing, or or not? I don't know, but it may be a question unanswered.
Okay, so now let's talk about your book, The Art of Piano Fingering. And so, what is the art of piano fingering? Is there an art, and what do you see that do people do things wrongly, and we need to fix some things? Are there some things that are popular mistakes that people do? I'd love to hear your perspective on it since you're an expert in this area.
Fingering has always been important, and every pianist figure in the history, including some of the great composers who were pianists too, mentions it here and there, uh, including Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach in his treatise, and so it's very important. However, the reason I wrote the book is that no one has put everything together in one place. Everything from all the composers, from all the virtuosity, from all periods, uh, into one place, which is my book. Uh, Fingering is important because fingering is not just how to manage or how to survive playing something on the piano. Fingering can have a variety. That means that fingering can make the same passage sound different. Different fingering can influence a different phrasing. Different fingering can help or uh, reflect on dynamics. So it's not, as I said first, it's not just what finger to put where simply mathematically, but it has to do with the music. It has to do with the virtuosity of how to interpret and how to uh, um, play, how to execute uh, things, passages, and everything that's in piano playing.
Do you distinguish between old fingering, the harpsichord, and previous instruments, and I guess you could say more modern instruments like 19th century and later, where the instrument became more advanced?
Of course, not only that, I also distinguish between the Romantic period piano fingering and nowadays piano fingering, where the pianos are so different than they were for even Chopin and Liszt that uh, we learned so much from them about fingering, and that I, you know, use and quote stuff that they did in fingering. And of course, Baroque fingering is another thing, and of course, it's different, but we use it. It's funny that we get to Chopin and then he teaches us how to do the Baroque fingering, like in his second etude in A minor, the right hand chromatic with the chords. These are actually Baroque fingerings that you cross not only with the thumb, but you cross between other fingers, and that's called paired fingering, as they played in Baroque and pre-Baroque. So there's differences, and yet there's some similarities. But when you get to today's pianos with the hard action and the big sound that they have to produce in great concert halls, Again, you have to be, your technique needs to be different than what it was before, and the technique and the fingering go together too.
Do you have a comment on which composers are better writers for the piano, as in their writing is more idiomatic, more ergonomic? Like, I'll give an example. Debussy, when he was a young critic, I guess he wrote, or when he was a critic, he mentioned that some of the sonatas of Beethoven were badly written for the piano, despite being a great composer. Do you feel that way about some composers?
Uh, Let me say first about Beethoven. It's a I don't know if it's a joke or what, but say that he revenged pianists with some things he wrote for the piano. Uh, some of the things he wrote are a bit on the inhuman side.
Right.
But he played the piano. He knew how to play the piano very well. So I don't know if you can actually give an example. I or people may say that Tchaikovsky writing for the piano is not like a pianist, and even furthermore, even more so, Dvorak. Yet, what wonderful piano music they have, whether the chamber music or the concertos, uh, and the, for example, the Seasons by Tchaikovsky. One can say that it's not exactly pianistic, but on the other hand, it's so pianistic. It's so wonderful because what is a piano? What is a piano? A piano is an orchestra. And if you can't create and think orchestrally while playing the piano, you're not playing the piano. So I think whether you play Tchaikovsky or whether you play Mozart, you got to think orchestrally. And even furthermore, both. It's just as an example, Mozart and Tchaikovsky. More than thinking like an orchestra, you got to think like opera, because that's the height of everything, and the piano can do it all if you let it and if you know how to approach it.
Wait, hold on a second. You said something pretty important there. You said opera is the height of everything. Could you elaborate more on that statement?
Uh, well, the opera combines everything in music, including lyrics. That's not music, but everything, singing, playing, uh, everything goes, acting, show, uh, uh, theater, everything goes into opera. So it's practically everything. Conversation, dialogues, duets, tercets, quartets. So does that answer it?
You are very well educated, but would you consider yourself, because you have such a personal voice in composition, would you consider yourself a self-taught composer, or would you say you studied composition?
uh, have you? Have you? I think you caught me on something. um, it's something I wanted to say earlier. When you ask me a question, I start answering, but then I forget everything I wanted to answer. I wanted to say something. Although I studied with Israeli composers and I studied with theoreticians or theoreticans, I don't know how you say it even. um, uh, I also studied composition, and I'm not trying to be presumptuous, but I studied compositions with Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, Schumann, Brahms, Prokofiev, and all these guys too, because I studied from what they wrote. And I think I did say it in different words before. I think that's part of studying composition.
You're a grandfather, and how has that shaped your worldview, especially your great career in music? Is family something that is important to you?
Of course, very important. Now, you will have to, I'm sorry for plugging my book, you'll have to read my autobiography uh, to see what a big part my family takes in my autobiography. Yes, it's very important, and I personally teach my three grandboys the piano, and these are my only students when I'm at home, uh, when I'm not traveling or working elsewhere around the world. So, and yes, family is very important. And I have lots of photos in my book of the whole immediate family.
Well, the great maestro, the concert pianist, composer, teacher, author, Rami Bar-Niv, he's a fantastic, eloquent speaker, and his two books are The Art of Piano Fingering. His second book is his autobiography, Blood, Sweat, and Tours, Notes from the Diary of a Concert Pianist. Go to his website and pick that up. And I hope you had a great time on the show. It really was a pleasure for me to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me.